I attended the last session as a member of the audience, and I answered a question about why unconscious bias training doesn't work. Couldn't help myself because I've been training clients on it for that's about 10 years now. So I've got some thoughts which I'd like to share with you. They're up for discussion and conversation. It's just my point of view. This is a broad structure that I want to take you through over the next few minutes. I want to explore if training is necessary, and if it is, whether it's sufficient. And then going to talk about, well, what sort of quality of training do you actually need to make it work and impactful, in my experience, as far as unconscious bias is concerned. What sorts of key messages should you be thinking about delivering if you're having unconscious bias training? But then, critically, probably the most important piece of the talk is, well, what else? Okay, because training, in my view, firmly, is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So what else do you need to think about to actually make your training work as well? Unconscious bias training is not like most forms of training. It's not about training people on an Excel spreadsheet or how to use PowerPoint, and then you go back to your workplace and you apply everything you've learned. It's actually a relatively new topic that most people aren't familiar with, certainly not to the degree of how to apply it back in the workplace. Okay. So it's really important that going into any plan for training that you understand that. And I hope I'm not teaching granny to suck eggs. I apologize if I am. These are just my reflections on what I've seen in my experience. So you've got to think through how that training is going to work and be impactful for folks. And I'll talk in a little bit more detail about that. My firm view is you can't not do it. If you're serious, if you understand what unconscious bias is. How many people are familiar, by the way, with unconscious bias as a topic? Good, most of you. Okay, I apologize to those that aren't. I'm going to focus on why the training is important and what else is important. In my view, you can't not do it, because everything around managing unconscious bias starts with creating awareness, whether you're training people in your organization generally, or specialist staff such as recruiters or line managers or whoever it might be. In terms of quality, this is not necessarily specific to unconscious bias training, but these are the sorts of things that people should be thinking about. It's got to start with having very clear objectives about what you want out of the training, what impact you want this training to have. I'm a big believer in live and face-to-face training. There are lots of online solutions, blended learning, e-learning. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm not saying they aren't useful. What I am saying is, in my experience, even though it's more expensive, if you can get it face-to-face and live in that sense, so in fact a webinar is better than e-learning in broad principles, then it gives a chance to create more of an impact. Voluntary, it should probably be voluntary, depending on the audience you have in mind. If you have a team of recruiters you're trying to train on specific processes, different issue. But there's a lot of anxiety around diversity, which obviously unconscious bias is closely linked to. So you've got to be very careful if you're going to mandate unconscious bias training linked to diversity. What you're trying to avoid is creating even more anxiety for people going into the training. Okay? The idea is to, of course, make people relax, but they feel comfortable to engage as well. Clear links to organizational goals, interactive, fun. There are various tools you can use that people can use privately to explore what unconscious biases they may have. Tailored to your industry, example stories, research data, etc., etc. It's not a comprehensive list, but you can see from that list it's not necessarily unique to unconscious bias either. But a lot of the time, my guess is that all of that stuff doesn't actually happen. It's a prerequisite if you want effective unconscious bias training. In terms of some of the key messages that we ensure we put into all of our training, it looks something like this. Unconscious bias, to me, is not a panacea for diversity and inclusion and equality. For me, it represents a big piece, a big missing piece of the D&I jigsaw, if you like. Okay, so it's not going to solve all your issues if you get it right in D&I, but actually it will take you a very long way if you actually analyse what unconscious bias is and how it manifests. If you've got a brain, you've got unconscious bias. So we all have unconscious biases. Therefore, there should be no stigma attached to them. That's the key message that needs to be in that training. because you don't want to send people away feeling stigmatized. Similarly, there should be no guilt about it. These biases are, by definition, unconscious. Okay, so people absolutely must not feel guilty about it. That's another key message that people must understand going into the training of HGS as well as coming out of the training. Here's a test if you've done unconscious bias training or are contemplating it. Are you thinking about incorporating organizational bias into it? Are you incorporating the concept of stereotype threat into it? These are both very closely related issues that I think actually deliver a stronger content and message. I haven't got time to go into it now, but if we've got questions, we've got time for questions. I can talk about those later. Of course, one of the aspects of UB is that the risks are all pervasive. That they're potentially present in all of the interactions we have with anyone else around us, whether they're our colleagues or people outside the organisation. But of course, they're also potentially present when you're reviewing CVs, other documents, simply assessing people in some way, shape or form. And the prize, of course, for me it's not D&I. Primarily the prize I think you should be thinking about in terms of unconscious bias and the message to deliver is performance. Personal performance, organizational performance. And when you get it right, what happens is you get better equality as well. So it's directly linked to D&I, but I think because we all operate in economic circumstances in our organizations, whether we're public or private sector or whatever else, and I would say this from 15 years of experience as a consultant, but 20 years prior to that, experience in large organizations. Okay. It's about performance, and also when you do it well, it's about how you get better outcomes in terms of quality. And then there are tons and tons and tons of techniques actually you can apply to unconscious bias. There are all sorts of books out there that you'll probably be familiar with that will give you those techniques. We can talk about those techniques. And they apply at both individual level and organizational level. Okay. And it's that very last line, I think, that's the most important probably out of that slide. Because what happens, in my experience, is we get asked all of the time to do unconscious bias training. What we very rarely get asked to do is this stuff you see on the screen. You've got to be strategic. Training in and of itself is not sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So it starts with training, with the awareness and understanding you see at the top. But there are various other things that I think we really need to get into as organizations. And if I have one frustration about unconscious bias training, it's why I don't get to have conversations with prospective clients and clients about all of the rest of this stuff. Because this is what's actually going to help you make it work. The risk actually, if you do unconscious bias training and leave it there, is that people get cynical after they've had the training. Because they're not stupid. They'll recognize that there are things the organization needs to do to move this forward, and they can't do everything at an individual level. So what do I mean about these things? To give you some examples here. Anyone heard of social network analysis, organizational network analysis? One or two of the academics in the room. Look it up. It's a really powerful tool, a very simple technique you can use to quickly get to issues like where did women go for their career and networking advice in organizations versus the men. All that kind of stuff. And it's so easy to do. Contextual recruitment. Anyone heard of contextual recruitment? So that's saying if you've got Joe and Harry, both with first-class degrees from Oxbridge, how do you distinguish between the two? Well, would it help if you knew that Joe came through private school and had a very privileged middle-class background, whereas Harry had to struggle through living in a low social income environment from a broken family. He had to work his way through university to pay the bills, those sorts of things. So contextual recruitment helps you to understand what experience people have had to go through in their past to achieve what they have. And that might have a significant bearing on who you would prefer as a recruit. Process audits. If you're recruiting, you know some of the data around unconscious bias. There are all sorts of things you can do in the various stages of the recruitment process, in your appraisals processes, in your succession planning, in your supervisory processes to mitigate unconscious bias. But how many people in this room can say hand on heart their organizations are taking that really seriously actually and doing something about it alongside training people on unconscious bias? There are lots and lots of specific products and services out there, and they're growing almost by the week. I'm having trouble keeping up with them myself. I've listed some on the right-hand side. We partner with a lot of these organisations because my job is to bring the right solutions to the client need. Okay, I can't do everything myself. Diversity is such a broad topic these days and such a deep topic. When we started in 2001, a lot of the work I was doing myself. These days it's about bringing the right solutions to the big, wide, diverse world out there. And last but not least, psychometric testing. So you can sit at a normal computer like this, even do it on your mobile phones if you've got flash memory on your phones, and take a test for whether you've got an unconscious bias with respect to a particular social group. Okay, you've probably heard of Harvard Project Implicit. That's a research tool. Not a bad idea to use it at a commercial level. I wouldn't recommend it for commercial use. Harvard themselves are very clear that it's a research tool. If you start looking at the reliability of that tool, it's a little bit dodgy, is probably too strong a word, but they recognize themselves. There are other fantastic tools out there. Hogref, other partners we use, is probably the best tool out there. So you can test individuals in your organizations, as long as you prepare them for what the results might be at individual level. You can test them at team levels. So for example, your recruitment team. You can test them to see if you've got an aggregate bias with respect to particular social groups, which might be impacting your recruitment process. That was very whistle-stop. I know, I talked very fast there. I hope you could hear me at the back as well. That's all I really have to say. I hope it made sense. I'm to reiterate, training is absolutely necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient. And I think you really do need to look at some of the things I've listed on that slide there if you really want to make this work. And if you can make it work, the prize is filling a big hole in that D&I jigsaw, but more generally in the organizational performance jigsaw as well, because this is broader than just D&I.
Thank you very much.